welcome to this episode of Smart Leaders Sell. I am Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert. And today I genuinely am joined by what is possibly one of my favorite people on the entire planet, Mr. Scott Doucet, which I feel like I should have done some kind of like drum roll for. So apologies there, but imagine that. And welcome to the show, obviously.
I'm okay with no drum roll because you've done something differently today. Usually you say that they're your favorite person on the internet, but I got the whole planet.
I know. See, just take
drum roll enough.
Take that moment and revel in it because
the narcissist in me is loving this.
See, and people obviously will want to know why you're one of my favorite people on the planet. And one is obviously because you are possibly the nicest person I think I've ever met.
Oh my God.
Nice. I'm not sure whether that's just like the Canadian in you. Like Canadian people are really nice. So there is obviously that. But then there is the other part, which is you are the guy who is behind this podcast every single week. And you make it absolutely phenomenal. You know, the sound quality is great. You send me little voice notes of all the hilarious noises I make. We'll cover the werewolf one in a second. You know, and you genuinely are like the best possible podcast launcher, planner, producer that I've come across in the whole internet. So I realize I'm talking about the internet like it's like London or something.
I'm, flattered, honored, overjoyed, blushing a little, also very nervous because that's a lot of hype. But yeah, I feel I don't do anything special because I geek out on this stuff. But then when I see the impact that it's making for the people I'm actually helping, it's always very humbling, but very mind-blowing as well. Because like I'll put out a podcast for someone, I'll get it all ready, give it to them. They put it out to their audience. And the next thing you know, they're getting like a speaking engagement or a book deal or clients and I'm just like, okay, one, congratulations. But two, why am I not fucking getting these things? Fuck you. Congratulations.
Good for you, but this sucks for me.
So as much as I appreciate the praise, I think my favorite part of getting behind your podcast is, again, sending you voice clips while you're at really fancy dinners of the awful noises that you make on your show and being like, okay, my life is made now. Someone has actually made this sound on a podcast. And it's always without context.
I know. And I want to be transparent with you guys. I got this voice note from Scott that was like, oh my God, you made this noise in the podcast. And I was at this event and I had to step out into the hallway and I literally made this noise.
Yeah, that was exactly it.
Nobody knows why. I don't know why. I don't know where it was. But if you caught that last episode and you heard that, I am sorry.
I will include the episode and the timestamp in the show notes.
Oh my God, yes. So there you go. If you want to go and listen to that noise, feel free. It was a good one. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the show today because you genuinely, I mean, one of the amazing things about you is that you really are ridiculously talented and you are like the industry's best kept secret, you know, and it's really interesting for me because when we look at people who are incredibly talented in their area of expertise, the majority of the time they do come and they go, yeah, I'm really good at this thing, but I can't always monetize it to the degree that I'd want to. And so I love that you kind of kicked off with that bit around, yeah, actually great for you, good for everyone getting clients, book deals, speaking gigs, but I want more of that too. You know, and that is a conversation that happens with people who are incredibly talented, but not always wanting to put themselves into the limelight, I guess, when it comes to selling their stuff, which I get at you about all the time, right? So it's nothing new.
There's a lot of issues I have with sales, with promotion, with getting yourself out there. And I see so much negative stuff that I'm always afraid to fall into that trap of doing something like atrociously, obliviously wrong. Like I see it links out all the time, doing really dumb things, inflating numbers instead of focusing on content. Like I really see a lot of dumb stuff. And a part of me is always worried I'm going to do that. But the thing is like integrity and dignity, where do those come in? I am a behind the scenes rock star very much because I'm introverted. But I also have this hidden extrovert who's like, I want to go out and make all the money, all of the money, all mine. And so...
I have an image of you like Gollum, you know?
Yeah.
My pressure. That is literally what you were like right then.
The fame, the money. I wants it. I needs it, precious. But then I put on the ring and go completely invisible. And that's just it. Like when I produce shows for people, they are the rock star. They are the brain. They are the talent. I'm the behind the scenes. And it's weird because I have started producing for the kinds of people who sing my praise in their show. And I'm like, do I get rid of this because it's an aside, or do I leave it in? And so I've left it in for the vanity aspect. Like, fuck yes, I'm great. I want people to talk about it. But I'm not one to go out and tout it myself very often. Okay. And so,
okay. Because we can for you, but we also want you to tout it yourself.
Yeah. So like, rather than pump my own tires, I just focus on my content and what I'm doing for my clientele, which kind of leads me to the question I need help with here. I am struggling with, because like, again, podcasting, great. Sales, I'm still a novice. I do my thing. I'm pretty good at it, but I'm always being like, Jess, how much do I charge for this? Or what do I do? Or I send out like an email and I get $250 back and I'm like, oh my God. And I get in touch with you immediately and thank you.
And I love it because it's amazing. You know, this is a man who we had a conversation and basically planned out my entire podcast before I'd even thought about like what I would be doing or the format of the show or anything, give me all this incredible information. And then was like, yeah, cool. Well, if you ever want anyone to like produce or anything, you know, maybe I do that, but also like I can recommend a ton of other people. And I was like, I want you. And also I want to pay you for this call. And Scott was like, no, it's fine. I'm like, take my money. Just go off and take my money.
Yeah. And then I listened to your first episode of your show and realized that I've been doing discovery calls wrong my entire life. And I went and changed my format immediately and started booking people like right away, paid and everything. And I was like, shit, this girl knows her stuff. Fuck.
And on that note, I have to apologize to everyone who had a discovery call with Scott after he listened to that episode because you got stung.
But I feel great. And that's the part that's important is now I can actually help my clientele because like before I'd send them away. They'd think they could do it and they couldn't.
No.
And so I'm realizing now, thanks to you, the benefit of having those concise short calls being like, I can help you and leaving it at that. But what I want to know, I understand it, but I'm having a hard time putting it into words. A lot of people get in touch with me and their biggest thing is like, I did a podcast for a year and I never got any sales from it. It was a waste of time. Or, hey, Scott, my listeners are here, but my podcast is not converting into customers. How can I do that? And my big thing is like, your podcast is a net to catch people, captivate people, build a relationship with people. It's not actually to sell to people. But I was wondering, because you're way more eloquent and knowledgeable about like the buyer psychology and that and funnels and things like that. If you could help me clear this up so that whenever someone says, hey, Scott, I'm not converting, I can just send a link to this.
I love it. You're like, Jess, do this part of my job that I'm not really that keen on.
Yes. And it's not that I'm not keen on it, because if I could drive this point home to every person in the world, I would. I feel like I'm missing something.
I think the first thing is, and I was saying this to you before we started the show, right? It's the same as anything that is a lead generation tool, a podcast, a blog, Facebook ads. It doesn't matter, whatever you're investing time to get traffic or to generate traffic from, their job is only to generate traffic. It is your job to retain them and to sell to them. You know, the podcast or the Facebook ad is purely there so that people can get a little bit of a taste of what it is like to get to know you, what kind of information you put out. You know, it's kind of the sexy thing that stands out in the club, you know, and let's put it into a club analogy here, because everyone I'm sure has been to a club in their life, right? When I was 18 and I had just started going clubbing with a large gaggle of girls, we would see one guy in the club, right? And there would always be that one guy, or girl if you're a guy, whatever, or girl if you're a girl, it doesn't really matter. But there would always be that one guy, that one girl in the place that you would go, oh my God, it's them. And they were the sex on legs thing that you had to kind of dance towards, you know, all evening, you'd be boogieing along. And that's your podcast. That's your Facebook ad. That's the sexy thing. That's the thing that you want people to gravitate towards. However, in all honesty, the sexy guy or the sexy girl in the club, they're not generally the one that you take home to your mum or the one that you end up in a long-term relationship with, right? Because they are looking for so many other guys and girls generally that you don't really get a look in. The long-term relationship is the thing that you build after the Facebook ad. It's the thing that you build when you're probably like 21, 22, and you're sick of going out every night and getting vomited on by other clubbers. Genuinely happened to me once. That's why I stopped going clubbing. And that's what people don't see. Your funnel is comprised of different parts. A podcast or a Facebook ad or anything that is a traffic generator is the first part. It's designed to get people looking at it. The second part is where you drive them to, right? Your podcast or a Facebook ad attracts them, but ultimately it's your job to say in your show notes, hey, if you want more, come here. Go to my Facebook group, go to my Facebook page, go to my website, download this thing. Because ultimately, and in the nicest way possible, all of my listeners are about to be like, we're never listening to a podcast ever again. Warning, people are followers. We like to be told what to do. We like to be led. You know, even leaders, even industry leaders like to be given a clue as to what to do next. Otherwise, you're literally making your people drive around on the highway with no idea what exit they need to take. So it is your job on the podcast to be like, hey, go and join the Facebook group, leave me a review, subscribe, go and do this thing, take this action. Because if you don't give them a call to action, how are they supposed to know? You know, your brain isn't going to download into theirs. They're not going to wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my God, I'm tuning into Scott and he says that I need to go to his website and do this thing. Because that's not what happens, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that because in my own words, one of the things I've told clients when they come to me, they're like, my podcast isn't selling. Before I message back, I'll always go and take a look at their Facebook groups, their Twitter, their everything, and just see how many people have found them. Yeah. I'll even ask, how did you find our fearless leader? And it's kind of a douche move because then like 40 or 50 people will go in and be like, oh, I heard you on the podcast. And then I reply back with, seems your podcast is working. Your sales process is jank. I'm like I'm that guy.
Like, if anyone ever sees that post from Scott in my Facebook group, always reply with something else. Just be like, yeah, I think I found her in the street. Like,
speaking of your Facebook group and that clubbing analogy, I feel like I have an unfair advantage because I'm literally the only guy in that club.
You are so lucky.
But I did go out and buy an 80s style wig, and I'm trying to convince my wife to do some makeup so I can fit in a little bit around there.
That would be so good. Seriously. It really would be epic. I think, you know, we all have those clients. I get clients who say, why doesn't my Facebook post sell? Or, you know, why aren't I converting on discovery calls? And the answer is, it's always the same. In order to sell anything, you have to do two things. One, you have to drive traffic to it. And that's the great thing about podcast. It's immediate traffic, right? But the second thing is you actually have to sell. You have to tell people when you have an offer, you know, and whether that is you direct them to your Facebook group or your website, and on there you make an offer, you know, you have a little tripwire, or you have a work with me page or whatever, or whether it is actually saying on the podcast, hey, actually, you know, you guys are the people who are listening to me twice a week. I have spots coming up to work with me in January. If you're interested, drop me an email. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, you get to sell how you want to in your business, but you can't say, oh, my podcast doesn't sell because you never use it to sell, or because you never use it to drive traffic anywhere that people would see a sale. Because really, if you just get on the microphone and talk and give great content all the time, but you never ever tell anyone how they can build a deeper relationship with you or where they can go to learn more from you, you're doing them the disservice. The podcast isn't the problem. The people aren't the problem. You are the problem, because you're not giving them the ability to get in touch with you. You're not sending them anywhere where they can buy. You're expecting them, you know, and in an adult world, I suppose it's not unrealistic, but if anybody, and Scott, you're going to be so offended, but if anyone has a boyfriend, right, you'll know that your boyfriend is not generally capable of thinking about the things that you would like him to do. So you end up just doing it yourself, right? We've all been there where we're like, oh, there's like a million dishes on the side. It'd be really great if he moved them, but he just doesn't see them. When you have a podcast, when you don't tell people where to go, when you don't ever sell to them, you're literally expecting them to see the dishes on the side. And they're never going to do it because they don't know. They don't see it.
Well, if I had a boyfriend, my wife would be pissed. So I don't, I don't really.
You don't get one.
However, I definitely get that where, you know, if you don't lead, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, but some people don't even lead the horse to the water. And that's the part that amazes me is like, I tell people, okay, your podcast is like a really good book or a movie. It's there to captivate an audience and make a fan. The result of my podcast has been that people approach me as someone who knows his shit. At this point, I don't think I've had a cold call. I think you were like my first semi-cold call in a while because the people who get in touch with me usually have heard me from my show and they're already like, hey, Scotty, what the fuck's going on, man? Blah, blah, blah. And they're acting like we're friends. And I'm like, I've never met you before.
Who are you?
And they're like, oh, I heard you on the show. And then I'm like, oh, okay, we are friends then. Cool.
But that's it. You know, you've got to open your community up. You can't expect people to, and my mum always says this weirdly. She's like, you can't make people behave the way you want them to. Now, I love my mum, but she is wrong on this. On this one.
To some degree.
Yeah. I'm really hoping she doesn't listen to this episode because that'd be really awkward. But, you know, you can help people do the things that you want them to do by giving them the roadmap. You can say, hey, listen to this podcast, then do this thing, download this opt-in, send me this email. And you would be surprised that when you say that, when you give a clear call to action, people will actually do it. And then it is your job from that moment on to nurture that relationship, to build it, not just with your like podcast, not just with your content that you're putting out week to week, but to actually put offers in front of these people.
Yeah.
To say, hey, here's how you can buy this thing. Because, you know, the reality is that none of your content outside of a sales page or a discovery call is designed to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's content. It's designed to educate and entertain.
Exactly. Educate, entertain, inspire, motivate, and create raving fans. The difference that people don't seem to get sometimes is that raving fans does not equal money. Offers equals money.
Yeah, that's where I was.
Right? You have a ton of people who are like, oh my God, we love you. Couldn't love you more. But they're not jumping on your offer because you're not making it.
Yeah. And to be fair, like I was in charge of a Facebook community with a co-founder and I wasn't permitted to make offers. Held me back a lot. I started the new Podcast Bay community. Things are going well. I'm going to be making offers in there and having a lot of fun in there. And people are already loving the environment a lot more. But just a kind of quick insight to kind of how I do things, right? Just for the listeners and my own benefit. So you can clear it up for me if you have any thoughts. I have my podcast, and my page on Facebook and my Twitter. The podcast is there for the content. The Facebook page and the Twitter are there to say, go check this out or post quotes from it or entertain people, what have you. My only call to action, the podcast, is to come hang out with us in the Facebook group. That's my only call to action every single time. Come hang out with us. And the reason why I do that is because the podcast positions myself and 2 members of my team as experts. I want to build a coaching, membership site, education thing with some production. My buddy Cole is a producer and he's phenomenally talented and he does voiceover intros and outros, things like that. He's awesome. I brought him on as a guest expert to talk production only. I have another lady, Ariel. She's mindset, inner game, entrepreneurship, that whole thing. So I've invited her as a guest. These 2 members are members of my core team who help me in the membership community. So Cole is positioned as an expert. He's getting people reaching out. Ariel's an expert. She's getting people reaching out. I am an expert. I'm getting people reaching out. But we toss them all into the same container to get a feel for how we work in tandem together. Mm-hmm. And that is where we sell to people, be it an upgrade to something, be it intensives or planning or coaching or whatever. It all happens within that Facebook community, not on the show. The show, Cole just tells you how to be a better podcaster. Ariel tells you how to get over nerves and imposter syndrome. And I just, mostly bitch.
Scott talks trash.
That is exactly what I do.
I think that's exactly right. I think it depends what kind of style you have. And it also depends in what area you want to work, because you'd be surprised at the amount of people who will listen to your podcast, but who don't want to join a Facebook group. I am in, I don't know, like 10 Facebook groups. I was doing a challenge with my community this week. And one of the things that, I said to everyone was streamline. Only be involved in the groups that you want to be involved in. Only be on the email list that you want to be involved in. So if lots of people have unsubscribed from your list recently and you're listening to this, apologies.
They haven't from mine, so I must be good.
Well, there you go. You're fine. But it's surprising that the feedback was very much, it's overwhelming. It's very overwhelming. We're bombarded constantly in our inboxes, in Facebook groups. And so actually, you might be missing a ton of people on your podcast who are like, oh, I love listening to Scott. And I wonder, like, if there was a way that I could get in touch with him that wouldn't be on Facebook. But they'd never hear out about any of your offers because you never mention them on there.
True. So true.
And I had a good client, good colleague, friend of mine recently, and they put out an offer to their private community first, so their email list. And the offer was at a lower price because those people were on an email list, they had been waiting for it, etc. And then she put it out on her podcast, double the price, and she got more people buy it because those people aren't on her list, but they are listening to a podcast every day of the week.
Well, that completely punches holes in my theory.
I think
but you do need a solid sales process behind it. You can't just say it.
Yeah, I think the thing is you have to manage expectations of your audience. So, it's a case of deciding, like, for example, when you sat down with me and said, what's the purpose of the podcast? And I said, well, I want to inspire people. I want to help people with sales knowledge. I want to normalize sales and make it easy for people.
You sounded so hippy dippy, and I actually wrote that in brackets. She wants to inspire people. Sounds like a hippie.
And there you go. And now you love it. So what can I say? But it is that kind of thing where you were like, what's the purpose? And for me, the expectation naturally gets managed because the thing I talk about all the time is sales. I'm like, hey, there is a lot of free content. I'm happy to give free value all the time. I want to give you my gold. But also there's a point where I can't give you that because it takes away from what I'm giving my clients. And while they're paying me for something, it would be irresponsible of me to say, oh, well, someone else can have that for free. Right?
Yeah.
So that's, and the boundary for me is I cannot, outside of like these sessions where I'll life coach somebody, I couldn't sit down for somebody for 3 hours and just go through their business and help them with sales because I have other people that would pay me for that. And it wouldn't be fair to them because I'm not giving it to them for free.
That's why I got on this episode, is because I need some help. And
exactly.
This is free.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? That's the way to do it. And I think you have to manage expectations in your own show and in your own business. And I say this to everybody across the board, whether it's your Facebook group, whether it's your blog, whether it's podcast, whatever. You have to say to people, I love giving value, but ultimately I also have a business to run. And so I can only give so much value and only so much time for free to you. If you want a quicker, easier, faster way of learning anything that I'm talking about in the blog, the podcast, the Facebook group, come and talk to me, book in a call with me. And I will happily tell you without pressuring you, there'll be no hard sell, what I can help you with and how I can help you move forward. That's not pitching somebody. That's not going down the hard sale route. That's just being open and transparent with people and saying, hey, I love what I do, but I do also have to make money because my bank manager is not keen on being paid in, pixie dust.
No, that is true. I love it. So yeah, ultimately what I'm gathering is that the podcast is just step one of a much deeper and more thought out process. However, you can still use it to perpetuate a selling scenario.
Yeah, I think we make things too complicated. And I think the reason that we make it complicated, and in all honesty, I could have turned around to you today and been like, oh, here's this like 5-step funnel for your podcast to make it sell that you can give to your clients, and you'd find that easier because you're not somebody who naturally wants to sell live, right?
True. Yeah.
So it's For me, that would have been the easy option. And I will still do that. If you want to have a funnel from your podcast, every show note should have a direction to your Facebook group, to your email list, or to your website where they can sign up with you. And then you should have something specific for those people. If they land in your Facebook group, you should be welcoming them and telling them what they're going to get. If they're going to a specific opt-in on your email list, you should have an email sequence that tells them how they can work with you and what offers are available, and move from there. But also, we can often hide behind funnels. It's very easy for people to say, oh, my podcast doesn't make money. It's very easy for people to say, oh, I don't want to do sales calls because I can't convert them. The reality is you've got to look at how often are you selling on that platform. Mm-hmm. If your purpose for your podcast is to make money, in all honesty, I think you're probably going about it in the wrong way, and Scott would agree with me there. But you should be actually making offers to your people. Think about it. Think about saying at the end of a show, hey, actually, you guys, I get a ton of questions about what's the best way to produce your show, or what's the best way to get on the microphone and be confident. I have something that, that could help with that. Would you be interested in hearing about it? I'm going to put up like a little poll in the Facebook group, or I'm going to put a little link in the show notes, and you can tell me. And if enough of you are interested, I'm going to put something out just for you. Right?
Yeah.
Because why should your podcast be any different?
I enjoy that too, because a lot of people are expecting the instantaneous sale when you just meet someone and they say, shut up and take my money like you did. But the truth of the matter is that moment caught me very off guard, because it doesn't happen that way normally. And I know it. Like, I know there's a little more of a get to know you process. I don't want to call it a hand-holding process, but just it takes time for people to trust your authority enough to pay into you. So continue to put out the podcast, continue to put up the polls, continue to garner engagement, get to know people, ask silly questions about their life, their pets, whatever. It doesn't have to always be on topic of sales in your community or podcasting in my community, but there always has to be that getting to know you process. And then people are more than happy to buy from you once they realize you know your shit.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, remember to train people to buy.
That was my mistake.
Right? This is something we talk about a lot. Everyone, and you've said that, yes, we need to get to know people. Some people will get to know you a lot quicker than others. For example, I'm like, hey, Scott, shut up and take my money, because when I talked to you, you spent like an hour and a half with me walking through everything I could ever possibly need to know.
Yeah.
I knew in that 90 minutes that I could trust you, that you knew what you're talking about, that you would, be happy to work with me, and that you were somebody that I'd be enjoying working with. So I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to nail this one down, because, otherwise I'm going to have to work with somebody else that I probably don't like and don't trust, right? People do that. We make decisions very quickly. So we can't always hide behind, oh, I'm going to get to know them for 6 months, because other people will be in your Facebook group and they'll have been listening to your podcast for a year. And then you're like, oh, but I'm not going to do anything else for 6 months. I'm going to just give value, give value, give value. And what that trains people into is this baby bird syndrome of, I'm just going to sit here and be passive, and Scott's going to give me information and he's never going to ask for anything back. And when he does ask for something back, they're all like legging it, because they're like, oh my God, why would you do that to me, Scott? You were giving me all this free stuff and now you want me to pay you for things. That's ridiculous, right? You terrify them.
It's true. And I've done it. I had my other community and I made an offer in there and almost got chased out with torches and fire. And I was the guy who made the group.
Like lynch mob.
Yeah, like I was terrified. And so the new group, people are already there and they know I'm going to be selling to them. And people in the old group hate me for it, for leaving and becoming a more sales-oriented person. But they weren't going to buy from me anyway. They wanted all the free I could give, and I would be homeless right now if I continued. So that's one of the things that I love about your show is you actually tell people, train your following to buy. Set that expectation.
It is our responsibility. And you know what? People love expectations. When I go into my community, I'm like, hey, I want you guys to do this. They're like, okay, great. Because I'm telling them what I want. You've got a wife, right? And people say this to me, Sam says this to me all the time. He's like, if you want me to do something, tell me. And as a woman, I get really bugged by this because sometimes I'm just upset. I'm just unreasonably angry for just nothing, really. But
yeah, he should know to move the dishes.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, for God's sake. And, I'll be very upset. And he's like, but I don't know. And I'm like, I just wanted you to do insert XYZ household job here. And he's like, well, why didn't you say? And that's as simple as it is, right? He's like, well, why didn't you just tell me you wanted me to do that? It's the same with your following. If you want them to review something, tell them. If you want them to buy something, tell them. If you want them to, write a testimonial or do something like that, you have to tell them. Because when we leave people in this place of limbo where we're giving them stuff for free, they kind of are like, oh, we'd love a way to express our gratitude, but we don't know what you want. So instead, we're going to do nothing. And if you leave that too long, and by too long, I do mean a couple of weeks, people get into the habit and you friend zone yourself. And so instead of wanting to buy from you, they're like, oh, that's cool. Nah. You become the boy at the club who's next to the really hot one who is, and everyone's kind of like, oh, you're great, but I don't want to kiss you tonight. I'm not going to make the move on you because I'm still waiting for this guy.
I've been that guy. Funny story about my wife, actually, is I was the nice guy friend zone for 8 years with her. And then when I finally opened my mouth over an entire quart of whiskey, like an entire 26er of whiskey later, I finally opened my mouth and freaked out. And I was like, and I want to be that guy who holds you when you cry. And I want to be this person. I want to be that person. And for 8 years, you haven't even looked at me until I grew a beard. And next thing you know, 3 days later, we were planning to date each other and fly out to each other, and because we were long distance and all that. So like, just by opening my mouth and saying like, this is who I want to be to you.
See?
That's all it took. Literally all it took. And I could have saved us both 8 years of horrible relationships, but good learning experiences, right?
And that's the thing. I mean, not only now is everybody like, oh my God, I wish Scott was my husband, but also, you cannot wait 8 years for a sale. And don't friend zone yourself for 8 years in the hope that in 8 years' time you're going to do what Scott did and drink a ton of whiskey and somebody's going to be like, oh my God, yeah, sure, I'll buy your stuff, because at that point in time your business is broke, right?
You're drinking whiskey for a reason. You're sad because you're broke.
yeah, you'll be having a problem. It is that kind of thing where you have to train people. You have to tell people what you want them to do, and it doesn't mean you go out there and you're like, hey, do this or you're crap. It means, hey, I've given you all this value and I'd really, really appreciate it if you would do this thing for me. Whether it's buy the thing, write the testimonial, give the review, whatever that looks like. Asking people to take an action will always get a response. If you are passive and you let them be passive, nothing will ever get done. Does that help?
That is like, if mics weren't expensive, I'd drop it. So, like, before we cap it off, I know we're getting to the end. I want to, first of all, publicly say thank you so much for putting out this podcast, because even though it's given me a job, which is great, it has actually, from episode 1, and which was how to never get another no on a discovery call, I think it was, which is such a clickbait title. And then the other one, how to write emails that sell, not smell. I have implemented both of those episodes and made money immediately after both. I sent off a $250 email and I got a $500 phone call just off the back end, and they continue to work for me, which is beautiful. So thank you. I see your face. You're blushing.
I'm like, I can't stop crying. I'm like, I'm not humble about this, but also, oh, thanks.
Yeah. But also, I will say that surprisingly enough, even though the episodes that I've implemented and have worked hold a near and dear place to my heart, my favorite episode so far has been the geese episode, because that episode, I finally met like a bird-hating soulmate. And that to me means a lot, because I was attacked by 2 swans in my lifetime, once as a baby and once as a 22-year-old at the zoo. And when I was 22, like when I was a baby, fine, I was like stepping to them, and they didn't like that I was on their turf, and they were like, hey man, get out of here. And they bit me on the bum. But At 22, this swan legitimately and he was black. That's neither here nor there, but it was frightening because he was bigger than all the rest of the white swans. And she swam all the way across this massive pond to walk up, single me out, and bite me on the hand. And fuck that. Like that. So when you talked about your experience of running away as this little girl in a big puffy coat, my wife and I went out shopping and we saw a big puffy coat for $50 and it was small and she told me to buy it and ship it to you. With just a letter that says honk, honk, honk on it.
Don't. Oh my goodness. Birds are just not my thing. I don't get it. It's their feet and their head and they do this little weird thing. It's horrible. I can't bear them. I'm literally traumatized.
Scary fact about swans, they actually drown geese. That's what makes them, yes, that's what makes them scarier to me. Is like geese are frightening, but there's an animal out there that is anti-goose and that's horrifying. So I know that I didn't stand a chance.
I love it. I love that you've weighed this up in your mind.
No, I have spent 29 years hating swans. Okay. There's been a lot of thought in this.
I have a lot of facts. Oh my God, I love it. That is amazing.
But it goes to show you that the episode where you didn't really, you talked about the psychology a bit, but that's not the part that hit me. It was the personality, the one quote, birds are fast. That one quote, I was like, I know, it's fucking scary. I relate. Favorite. This episode is my favorite. And it had nothing to do with the sales. I'm sorry.
Well, there you go, guys. I mean, I don't know whether anyone else feels like that. If you do, please get in touch. Let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are on birds, because apparently some of us have traumatic bird pasts.
And I'm just going to make an offer. I will send you a 10-step survivor guide if you pay. A goose survival guide. No, I don't actually have that.
Badge. We'll send you a little badge with an angry swan on it. Oh my God, thank you so much for coming on today's episode. Seriously, it's one of those things where I've wanted to interview you or talk to you for so long and kind of get you out from behind the microphone or behind the editing software. That doesn't really sound as jazzy, does it? But it's
behind the
so much
scene.
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I knew this show was going to be ridiculous, and I'm glad I waited until I had an actual question instead of we wanted to call a show No Diggity and talk about dignity the entire time, but I feel like this went so much better.
I feel like that's still the title, right?
We will figure something out.
Okay.
Because we didn't even hit dignity on this one, so.
Well, dignity, who has that? Depends how many cocktails I've had at the weekend. But it's been epic, and I cannot stress enough, if you are thinking about producing a podcast in the next, 12 months or just ever, but preferably thinking about Scott's Silly Time, 12 months, or you are interested in podcasting, or you are looking for new podcasts to listen to, where can people find you, Scott? Because ultimately, I can't recommend you highly enough. I absolutely adore you. I adore your work. I tell everybody, including John Lee Dumas, at the recent Upreneur conference about you. And I actually told Amy Schmittera about you as well in the toilet. Glamorous as my life is. So, I talk about you all the time, but where can people come to get their dose of Scott Doucet?
Well, podcastbay.net is live, which is beautiful. And you can catch the show there. And you can also get involved with the first part of my funnel. And yes, my sales process is jank. So you can also go check out Podcast Bay, the community on Facebook. And that's where I do a lot of my personal flair and fun stuff. So yeah, podcastbay.net or the Facebook community. I am happy to have you there. Whether or not you want to start a podcast in the next 12 months, learn a bunch, buy stuff, or just have that one angry, sarcastic podcasting friend, I'm there for you.
I love it. And his Facebook Lives are amazing. So make sure that you definitely check out the community. Make sure you go and check out his sales funnel and see how much of it has been influenced by the podcast over the last couple of weeks. And obviously, please make sure if you've liked this episode, leave us a review. Tell me and Scott what you thought our chat was like, unless you thought it was bad, in which case, don't leave a review. Joking.
Send it to me anyway.
I'm sort of joking. But yeah, seriously, leave us a review. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss the next episode. And I will see you on Monday, and we'll be doing another deep dive training into something really cool, because next week is all about funnels. So Scott, you can get yours sorted right then and there.
Perfect.
See you in the next episode.